Hey everyone. Tonight we're climbing high into the misty heavens, where the air is thin, the egos are massive, and the thunderstorms have opinions. We're going to visit the realm of the ancient Greek gods, Mount Olympus, home of divine drama, endless wine goblets, and enough petty squabbles to put any reality TV show to shame. Right now, you're not on Earth. You're hovering just above it, nestled in the clouds where the marble halls of Olympus glint faintly in the starlight. There's the sound of a soft harp echoing down golden corridors, the clink of ambrosia-filled goblets, and the not-so-subtle sound of someone whispering gossip behind a pillar. You take a slow breath. The air smells like warm olive oil, thyme, and just a trace of lightning. That's Zeus's cologne. It's called Dominion. But don't get too comfortable. You're a visitor here, and the gods, well, they're not known for being calm or particularly reasonable. This place may look serene, but underneath those golden clouds, the Olympians are constantly scheming, seducing, or throwing thunderbolts at one another. Which brings us to tonight's story. Our main characters? A woman too beautiful for her own good, a god with a wandering eye, and a queen with a vengeance streak that makes all others pale. You're about to meet Io, a mortal priestess who served the goddess Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, and absolutely not someone you want to annoy. Unfortunately, Io is about to do exactly that. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now turn off the lights, let the gentle hum of the fan surround you, and let yourself drift quietly into tonight's story. You're walking up the steps of Hera's temple now. It's made of pristine white marble, covered in ivy that shimmers gold at dusk. Your sandals slap against the cool stone, echoing in the quiet courtyard. Inside, it's peaceful, fragrant. Candles flicker in sconces shaped like peacocks, Hera's favorite bird, and you're welcomed by the other attendants. The temple is a place of silence, order, and the kind of sacred tension that comes from working for a boss who can smite you if your incense is too smoky. You're not alone. Among the priestesses is Io, whose hair gleams like sunlight over barley fields, and whose every movement seems practiced but natural, graceful, even as she carries buckets of water or sweeps flower petals from the altar steps. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, it's kind, warm, a voice that makes you want to tell the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Naturally, the moment a certain god sees her, things get complicated. One evening, you notice a strange hush settle over the temple. Not the usual sacred kind. This one feels heavier, charged. You glance up, and there he is. Zeus, king of Olympus, god of sky and storm, master of weather-based flirting. He's lounging on a cloud like it's a chaise longue, one arm propping up his golden curls. Eyes locked on Io with the intensity of a man who's about to recite a tragic poem just to get attention. You, being sensible, pretend to be fascinated by a bowl of figs and try to become invisible. Zeus does not love quietly. In fact, he doesn't do anything quietly. And even though Io is a priestess, a servant of his actual wife, he's clearly decided she's worth a thunderbolt or two. he starts showing up in increasingly ridiculous disguises. A white stallion grazing outside the temple, a gentle breeze that lifts Io's hair, a golden retriever, don't ask. Finally, one afternoon, you see him descend in a shimmering cloud, shaped almost like a man, and then melt toward her in a swirl of gold. Historians still debate whether Io willingly returned his affections or simply got caught in a situation with very few polite exits. Some versions say she was flattered, others suggest she ran. What's certain is that Zeus was not subtle, and Io's fate was sealed the moment he entered the picture. That night, Hera starts asking questions. She always does. You wake to the sound of thunder, and not the natural kind. The candles have all gone out on their own. The peacocks are screeching. Somewhere far off, you swear you hear a voice ask, "Where is she?" You don't need to ask who. When Hera suspects something, she doesn't wait for evidence. She makes her own. And Io? Poor, radiant, innocent, or perhaps not so innocent Io? She has no idea what's coming, but you do. Because you're standing right in the middle of a divine love triangle, and that's never the safest place to nap. Time to tighten your sandals. The clouds are beginning to darken, and the Queen of the Gods is just getting started. You didn't sleep much last night, not with Hera prowling through the temple like a lioness in a marble cage. The peacocks wouldn't shut up, and even the olive trees outside were trembling. Something's off. And you know exactly what it is. Hera knows. Oh, she hasn't said anything aloud. Yet. But the temple feels colder, the air tighter. The way she glances around, that's not suspicion. That's confirmation. You've seen this before. Hera doesn't ask if. She asks when, and how soon she can unleash a punishment so poetically tailored, it'll make the bards weep. You're sweeping the temple floor this morning when she glides in. Not walks, glides. Her gown trails behind her like mist, embroidered with stars and symbols no mortal could fully understand. She says nothing at first, only places a hand on Io's shoulder with the sort of gentleness you'd reserve for a sleeping snake. Io freezes. Everyone freezes. Io, Hera says softly, you've been spending a lot of time outside the temple. You tense. Io nods, bowing slightly. Yes, my queen. The olive branches needed gathering. Did they? Hera replies, not smiling. It's not really a question. You keep your eyes on your broom. That broom is the most fascinating object in existence right now. Hera continues on, her peacock entourage sweeping after her, feathers dragging like royal velvet. The moment she's gone, Io lets out a breath. You all do. But you all know, it's too late. Hera has noticed. Hera always notices. That afternoon, a strange fog rolls in. Not the usual soft mist that settles in the hills. This one is thick, glittering faintly, curling unnaturally around columns and creeping under doors, like it has somewhere very specific to be. You follow it with your eyes and realize it's heading straight toward Io. You dash after her. Don't ask why. Maybe it's loyalty. Maybe it's morbid curiosity. Maybe you've read enough tragic scrolls to know when the climax is about to hit. Io's out in the orchard, humming to herself, picking figs, her white dress catching the sunlight. Then the fog reaches her. It wraps around her ankles, climbs her legs like ivy, and before she can even scream, she's gone. Well, Not gone, exactly, because standing there now is a cow. A gorgeous, shimmering white cow with wide, terrified eyes. You know that expression. It's still Io. Yes, Hera turned her into a cow. Historians still debate whether this transformation was magical, metaphorical, or just an elaborate rumor exaggerated by poets desperate for good material. But you're here, and you're staring at a cow that was Io, and let me tell you, it's not metaphorical. Now you might be thinking, okay, but why a cow? And that, dear sleepy traveler, is the question. Hera wasn't known for random punishments. No, this was personal. A cow is useful, sacred, humble, and, most importantly, easy to lock up. It's hard to elope with a thunder god when you've got hooves. Hera appears again, this time with a face carved from marble and just a glimmer of smugness in her eyes. "Oh," she says, voice dripping honey, "what a beautiful heifer. She must be a gift from someone." She meets Zeus's eyes across the clouds. He doesn't say a word, just frowns slightly and vanishes into thunder. And here's the kicker. Hera doesn't kill the cow. Oh no, she keeps her. "I'll take care of her," Hera says. "Make sure she's safe." You gulp. Safe, in this context, means watched. Which brings us to Argus. Argus Panoptus, the all-seeing giant. A creature with 100 eyes scattered across his body like jewels on a robe. No one knows where he came from, exactly. Some say he was born from the earth itself. Others, that he was Hera's personal creation. Either way, he is terrifying and incredibly boring. That's not an insult. It's a tactical strength. Argus is so boring that he's impossible to sneak past. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't blink. Or rather, he always blinks. Just never all at once. At any given moment, a dozen eyes are watching the horizon, another dozen are checking on the cow, and 3 more are watching you. So now, Io is a cow with an anxiety disorder, and she's being babysat by a giant walking security system with no concept of personal space. You try to be helpful. You bring Io a bundle of fresh hay, whispering her name. She blinks at you, miserable. Her tail flicks in irritation. "Try not to moo too loud," you say gently. You know Hera's still listening because she is. Hera is always listening. You watch as Argus begins one of his endless rounds, walking circles around Io, describing the clouds, reciting poetry about rocks. You can tell she'd rather chew her cud in peace. It's like being guarded by a sentient podcast that never pauses. And deep in the clouds above, Zeus stews. He hasn't said anything, hasn't sent lightning, but the skies are gray. You know he's watching. And if you've learned one thing about Zeus, it's this. He never takes no for an answer, especially when it comes from his wife, which means the storm is coming. But for now, the temple is quiet, too quiet. And poor Io, trapped in a body not her own, stares up at the sky and wonders if she'll ever see her real face again. You're starting to feel sorry for the cow. Io stands in the meadow behind the temple now, tethered to a sacred fig tree, her white coat gleaming in the sun like polished ivory. If you didn't know better, you'd say she was just an ordinary cow. But you do know better. Every time her ears twitch at a passing bird, or she lets out a miserable sighing moo, you see the outline of the girl she used to be. And beside her, like an overly committed hall monitor, is Argus. He never stops talking, never stops watching. One moment he's droning on about the architectural structure of Mount Lycabettus. The next, he's reciting every known species of nymph by genus. You swear he even recited a cloud's entire biography the other day. No offense to clouds, but they're not known for their narrative arcs. Io isn't taking it well. She's been a cow for 3 days now, and she's moody, confused, and desperately wants to swat Argus with her tail. You're tempted to help, but again, 100 eyes. The thing about Argus is that he doesn't sleep. Not like you or I do. Half of his eyes nap while the others keep watch. It's unfair, honestly. Even the cypress trees around the meadow are growing twitchy from the constant surveillance. You once caught a bird mid-song, blinking uncomfortably as Argus hummed the tune back at it, off-key. You bring Io some water. She drinks slowly, then looks at you with those deeply human eyes. You imagine she's trying to say, "Please tell me this is temporary." Oneid, and you don't have the heart to answer. But deep in the shadows of the clouds, someone else is watching now. Zeus has had enough. He's pacing Olympus in a stormy sulk, thunder trailing behind him like a dramatic cape. He's furious, not just because his latest romantic conquest is now a bovine, but because his wife outmaneuvered him again. The only thing Zeus hates more than being ignored is being outwitted. So he calls upon the one god who can handle this kind of delicate situation, Hermes, messenger of the gods, patron of travelers, thieves, and, most conveniently, cunning plans. Hermes shows up with a grin and a harp. You meet him as he descends from Olympus wearing sandals, with little wings fluttering at the ankles. He smells faintly of lavender and chaos. "Hey," he says, nudging you with a wink. "How's the surveillance giant?" "Verbose," you answer. "Monotonous. Arguably immortal." Hermes laughs, twirling the harp in his hands. "Perfect." And then he walks straight into the meadow like it's open mic night. Argus, curious but never careless, turns a few eyes toward him. "Who are you?" he asks, his voice as slow as moss growing. Hermes sits cross-legged on a sun-warmed rock, begins to pluck the strings of the harp, and replies, "I'm no one special, just someone with a few stories. Want to hear one?" Argus, being Argus, says yes, and Hermes begins to play. Now, this isn't your usual harp recital. Hermes doesn't strum sleepy lullabies, he weaves them. His music moves like honey through the air, warm and heavy and just a little dizzying. It tells stories of shepherds chasing stars, of frogs turning into wine, of a nymph who outdanced the moon. You sit at the edge of the meadow, and despite yourself, your eyelids flutter. You're not even the target, and still, you feel the drowsiness sneak in. You glance at Io. She's lying down now, chewing grass more slowly. Even the fig tree seems to be swaying in rhythm. But Argus is still awake, mostly. Half of his eyes have shut. The other half blink lazily, trying to focus. He's swaying now. You watch him mutter, "That wasn't historically accurate," before snorting softly and drooping forward. Another eye closes, and another. Hermes' fingers move slower, softer. His voice lowers until it's almost just breath. One final string is plucked. The meadow holds its breath, and Argus Panoptes, 100-eyed, ever-watchful Argus, falls asleep. Historians still debate Whether this was the first lullaby ever sung with divine intent, or just the best musical performance in Greek mythology. Either way, it worked. Hermes stands, brushing dust from his tunic. "Showtime," he whispers. You watch, heart pounding gently now, as he steps forward, unsheathes a blade as thin as moonlight, and, well, let's just say, Argus doesn't wake up again. The sky darkens almost immediately. The wind carries a whisper. Hera knows. You don't know how. Maybe one of Argus's eyes blinked a final message into the clouds. Maybe Hera's rage is just fast like that. Hermes doesn't stick around to explain. He vanishes in a shimmer of sandal wings, leaving behind only the harp and a faint breeze that smells like regret. You run to Io, still a cow, still confused, but now untethered. You whisper, "Run." She looks at you, then the horizon, and for the first time in days, she moves without surveillance. You watch her hooves kick up dust as she bolts toward the trees. She's free, but not safe. Not yet. Because you know, just as surely as Hermes knew, that Hera is not done. Not by a long shot. You've barely caught your breath when you hear the sound. It's not thunder. Not this time. It's something sharper, colder. Like the sky is grinding its teeth. You look up. The clouds have turned the color of bruised peaches, tinged with gold at the edges, but pulsing with something darker. A storm is coming, but it's not Zeus's. This one belongs to Hera. You duck under the branches, trying to follow Io, still a cow, still understandably panicked. As she barrels through the underbrush, she's faster than you'd think for someone with hooves. Maybe it's the divine terror. Maybe it's just adrenaline. Either way, she crashes through trees, over streams, past startled shepherds who blink and mutter, "Was that a..." Yes. Yes, it was. Hera's fury rolls in behind you like a wall of pressure. You don't see her, but you feel her, in the way the air turns heavy, in the sudden silence of birds, in the way your skin crawls like it's remembering every mistake you've ever made. And you? You're running after a divine cow across ancient Greece, trying not to get smited. Congratulations. Somewhere over the hills, Io stumbles into a clearing and freezes. You skid to a halt behind her. Standing before you is something new, something awful, a gadfly. Now, for most people, a gadfly is an irritating insect, big, slow, prone to biting. But when Hera sends one, oh, it's not just a gadfly. This one is buzzing with divine spite, wings glinting like obsidian shards, eyes pulsing with vengeful intelligence. It's been sent not to kill, but to torment. And poor Io, already panicked, already exhausted, gets swarmed. The fly bites, stings, circles her head, dives at her tail. You try to wave it away, but it dodges your hand like it's been trained in aerial combat. Io moves pitifully and takes off again, galloping down the hillside with the gadfly in hot pursuit. You follow. Of course you do. At this point, you're more invested in this cow's well-being than your own. Historians still debate whether Hera literally created this torment fly or simply empowered a particularly ambitious one. Some suggest it was metaphorical, representing Io's guilt or shame or inner chaos. But you know what you saw: wings, teeth, and vengeance. Io runs. She doesn't stop at the next village or the next. She tears through marketplaces, scattering fruit carts and goats. A potter curses as his amphorae explode. A child cheers, thinking it's a festival. She races through groves and riverbeds, past startled oracles and confused fishermen, until finally, after days of relentless travel, she reaches the sea. You catch up just in time to see her hooves splash into the shallows. The waves roll up against her legs, cool and welcoming. But she doesn't stop. She plunges forward, swimming out into the surf, desperate to put distance between herself and the buzzing terror behind her. And that, dear sleepy traveler, is when geography takes a mythic turn. You watch as she swims across what will later be called the Ionian Sea. Yes, named after her. Because when a divine cow crosses oceans to escape your wrath, the least you can do is name a body of water after her. You spend the crossing clinging to driftwood, because apparently, divine transformation doesn't include the courtesy of a boat for friends. The sea is surprisingly gentle. The gadfly, for once, has been left behind. You drift under constellations and wonder what happens to someone who used to be a girl, became a cow, and now may be turning into something else entirely. Io eventually reaches land, foreign land, Egypt. And that, strangely enough, is where things shift. She stumbles out of the surf onto warm sand, her hooves sinking slightly. The air smells different here, drier, richer, and the people who find her don't scream. They kneel. To them, she is not a cursed creature, but a sign, a sacred being, perhaps even a goddess. They name her Hathor. You watch as priests in linen robes approach with offerings of figs and milk. They bow low. You want to say, she was just a girl. She liked dancing and warm bread. She didn't ask for this. But maybe that's the point. None of the myths ever ask. Io, still a cow, is led gently to a shaded courtyard filled with palms and quiet songs. She lies down. For the first time in weeks, she sleeps. And you? You wonder if this is the end. If Hera has finally lost interest. If Zeus is finally feeling guilty. If a girl, turned into a cow, chased across continents by divine cruelty, can finally rest. But myths don't work like that. You know there's still more to come, because gods never forget, and mortals never quite escape. Egypt is unlike anything you've ever known. You step off the boat, well, driftwood, and the sand welcomes you with a warmth that somehow feels ancient. The sky is wider here, the sun heavier, and everything smells of lotus, incense, and dry stone. People speak a language you can't quite understand, but their faces are calm, reverent, as if they know something you don't, which, honestly, wouldn't be surprising at this point. Io, still a cow, still bewildered, is led into the heart of a temple. But here's the twist. No one tries to turn her back. No one calls her cursed. They crown her with garlands, bathe her hooves in oil, call her divine. You're standing in the corner, watching a line of priests bow before a cow, and you begin to wonder, has Hera's punishment become a promotion? The Egyptians see signs in everything. A comet isn't just a rock, it's a message. A flood isn't bad luck, it's a blessing. And a glowing white cow who stumbled in from the sea. That's a goddess, obviously. They name her Hathor, not just a goddess, but the goddess of motherhood, music, joy, and yes, cows. There are murals being painted already, offerings stacked. One particularly enthusiastic scribe is composing hymns. You peek at the papyrus. It rhymes. Historians still debate whether Hathor and Io were truly connected, or if later scholars merged them out of convenience. But you're here. You've seen the transformation twice now. You've heard Io's weary breathing. You've felt the tremble of her flank under the gadfly's assault. And you know one thing. She didn't ask for worship. She asked for freedom. But worship, it seems, is what she's getting. Zeus, ever opportunistic, finally shows up. He descends like a weather forecast you didn't subscribe to. Thunderless, but definitely smug. He strolls through the temple gardens, barefoot in the sand, admiring the statues. You see him pause before one of Io mid-moo, brow furrowed. She looks taller in person, he mutters. You want to yell at him, maybe throw a date at his head. But he's a god, and frankly, you're not in the mood for a thunderbolt. Zeus kneels beside Io. She flinches, which is fair. I didn't mean for this to happen, he says, stroking her muzzle. Well, not all of it. You raise an eyebrow so high it almost detaches. She was just radiant, Zeus continues. Can you blame me? You can, and you do. Internally, loudly. But then something happens you weren't expecting. Guilt. Zeus looks. Dare you say it? Apologetic? He sighs. The kind of sigh that makes the air taste like ozone, and says, I'm going to fix it. You cross your arms. Like you fixed Argus, he ignores you. That's fair. You're not the focus. Zeus vanishes again. Poof, gone. And you hear whispers days later. He's petitioning Hera. Now, that's new. Usually he just lies, distracts, or throws lightning at the problem, petitioning. That's almost respectful. Meanwhile, Io continues her unexpected reign as bovine deity. She's brushed daily, sung to nightly, and given the finest fig mash you've ever smelled. She even gets jewelry. Yes, jewelry. The Egyptians are not subtle, but you see it in her eyes. This isn't peace. It's a gilded pen. No matter how divine the garlands, she's still not herself. And Hera? Oh, Hera hears everything. The sky darkens one evening, not with storm clouds, but with feathers. Peacocks, dozens of them. They land silently on the temple roof, tails folded, watching. Then a breeze. Sweet, cool, deliberate. Hera has arrived. She doesn't stride in with wrath this time, no. She glides, regal, composed, wearing robes the color of fresh bruises and gold so soft it gleams like honey. Everyone kneels except Io, because, well, she's a cow. You hide behind a pillar. Hera approaches slowly, eyes fixed on the creature that once served her altar. And there's a moment, brief, strange, where she almost seems contemplative. She was never meant to be a goddess, Hera says to no one in particular. She was supposed to learn humility. You want to argue that maybe she's learned enough, that maybe being chased across the Mediterranean by a divinely weaponized housefly counts. But Hera isn't looking for your input. She lifts her hand, time tightens, and then she lowers it. I'm done, she says simply. Take your little cow and go. A breeze kicks up. The peacocks take flight, and Io begins to change. Her limbs lengthen, her fur recedes, The sacred jewelry slips off her ears and clinks softly to the floor. You rush forward, and for the first time in what feels like forever, she looks at you, eyes human, hair wild, breathing hard. She's back. You exhale. So does she. Then she collapses, not from pain, but from exhaustion. You sit beside her, listening to the quiet. The peacocks are gone. The air is still. Hera has vanished into her own silence, and the girl who was a cow, who was a goddess, is sleeping soundly beside you. The next morning, you wake to the sound of silence, real, honest silence. No gadflies buzzing, no gods brooding, no paranoid giants listing ancient mountain ranges alphabetically. Just the soft rustle of reeds and the gentle lap of Nile water against the temple docks. Io is still asleep, curled in on herself like someone who hasn't had a good nap in weeks, which, to be fair, she hasn't. Her hair is tangled with temple petals, her arms wrapped around a folded cloth someone must have offered her in the night. She looks peaceful, human. You let her rest. After everything, she's earned that much. You wander outside the temple courtyard and watch the priests lighting morning incense. They don't say a word about the fact that their sacred cow is now a very confused teenage girl, wrapped in a linen sheet. Maybe they already know. Maybe it happens more often than you think. You wouldn't be surprised. Ancient temples are weird like that. One priest gives you a papyrus scroll, a hymn to Hathor. You glance at the verses, filled with poetic praise about milk of the sky and golden hooves. You consider editing it, then think better of it. Let them keep their mythology. Io deserves a legend, even if it's a strange one. Eventually, Io wakes. She sits up slowly, rubbing her temples, blinking at the sunlight as if it's brand new. You hand her some water. She takes it wordlessly, drinks, then looks at you. "Did I eat grass?" she asks. You nod. She groans and falls back onto the stone bench. "Of course I did." You both laugh, awkwardly, then freely. It's the kind of laugh that only comes after surviving something absurd and wildly unjust. And divine. Once she's steady, the two of you talk. She remembers almost everything. The fog, the transformation, the fly, the endless running. She doesn't remember the Nile crossing or how exactly she arrived here. But she remembers Hera's eyes, and Zeus's voice, and Argus humming something that sounded suspiciously like a lullaby about tree bark. You try not to laugh again or cry. It's a delicate balance. She wants to go home, of course she does. But where is home now? The temple in Argos won't take her back. Not after all this. She can't exactly show up to her old priestess job and say, "Hey, remember when I turned into a cow? Fun times." Besides, she's been deified in Egypt. There's a statue of her being built in the courtyard. People are already painting murals. One of them has wings. She never had wings. Historians still debate whether the Io-Hathor connection was ever real, or if Egyptian scribes simply absorbed her into their mythology because she fit the aesthetic. But standing beside a girl who used to be a cow, who's now being worshipped in multiple languages, you're starting to think the gods don't really care about accuracy. They care about stories. Zeus returns later that afternoon. You're sipping something that might be date wine. Don't ask too many questions. and he just appears beside the papyrus trees, casually leaning against a pillar like he didn't just cause an international identity crisis. "You look better," he says to Io. She glares. It's impressive, considering she's holding a cup of fig mash. Zeus tries a new approach. "Listen, I've talked to Hera." You snort. Io rolls her eyes. "No, really," he insists. "She agreed to let you live in peace. No more transformations. No more surveillance peacocks. I even got her to lift your curse across all realms. You're human again, and you'll stay that way." Io narrows her eyes. "What's the catch?" Zeus looks genuinely offended. "Catch? Please. I don't always have an agenda." You both stare at him until he sighs. "Okay, tiny catch. I promised Hera you wouldn't stay in Greece, or Olympus, or anywhere near any temples of hers." Io frowns. "So I'm exiled, exalted," he says quickly. "You're honored, you're free. You're also slightly banned. You're pretty sure that last part was added by Hermes. Still, Io considers it, and you can see her wheels turning. For the first time since the transformation, she has a choice. She can't go home, but she can start somewhere else. And in the grand tradition of mythic women wronged by gods, she decides to take control of her own ending. "I'll stay here," she says, chin high. "Let them worship me if they want. Let them sing. But I'm going to be something more than just a story about a girl who got turned into a cow." Zeus raises an eyebrow. "Like what?" Io smiles. "A queen." You smile too, because sometimes when the gods write your story, you get to take the pen back. Later that night, you help Io braid her hair. You teach her how to fold a tunic the Egyptian way. She teaches you how to walk like someone who's been chased across continents by a fly and came out the other side victorious. You both watch the sun dip behind the temples of Memphis. The air smells of incense and dust. Somewhere, a harp plays softly. Hermes, probably, hiding behind a pillar with a grin. And for once, everything is calm. Adio is human. The gadfly is gone. Hera is quiet. And the Nile flows gently by, like it always has, carrying stories downstream. The Nile is a good listener. You find that out over the next few days, as you and Io settle into your strange new rhythm of almost peaceful exile. Each morning begins with a soft, warm hush of the Egyptian dawn, distant birds, priests sweeping stone courtyards, the slow hum of traders preparing their stalls along the riverbanks. Io, no longer a cow but still very much a legend in progress, has become, well, not exactly normal, but she's adjusting. She walks barefoot through the temple gardens now, head high, acknowledging every bow and whispered prayer with the quiet dignity of someone who's been mooed at in multiple languages. You spend your time pretending not to notice the murals. They're going up fast. One shows Io riding a golden chariot pulled by lotus flowers. Another depicts her hovering above a pyramid crowned with sunlight. It's artistically ambitious, slightly exaggerated. Okay, wildly inaccurate. "Why do I have 6 arms in this one?" she asks you one morning, peering at a fresh wall painting. "Artistic liberty," you shrug. "Or someone misunderstood when you waved at the high priest yesterday," she groans. I just wanted more grapes. The priests are building a shrine now, small but elaborate, the kind that starts humble and inevitably grows larger than anyone intended. They're calling her the one who arrived from the sea. You suggest they shorten it. They don't. Historians still debate whether this period of Io's life represented actual rule or symbolic reverence. Was she an honored guest? A worshipped icon? A politically convenient divine import? You've seen it firsthand, and the answer is yes. All of the above. She's myth and person, an accidental goddess. Meanwhile, back in Greece, rumors swirl. You hear them from passing traders, wind-burned and wide-eyed, who stop at the temple gates and whisper tales over honeyed bread. They say the Nile accepted a foreign spirit. They say the stars changed shape when she touched the shore. They say Hera's been quiet. That last one is said with the kind of reverent unease usually reserved for dormant volcanoes. You and Io listen, say nothing, and pour more tea. One night, Hermes shows up again. You're not surprised. He always shows up when the plot starts to lull. He materializes beside the incense altar like it's a social call. You're both looking very divine today, he says, tossing a fig into his mouth. Io doesn't flinch. I'm trying to be boring so no one worships me again. You're doing a terrible job, he grins, motioning toward the dozen rose garlands draped across her doorway. Hermes stretches out on a stone bench, wings on his sandals fluttering faintly. Zeus sends his regards. Hera, too. Kind of. Io raises an eyebrow. Is that the kind of regards where lightning comes next, or the kind with fruit baskets? Neither. Hera's officially moved on. She's hunting down some poor nymph named Echo now. New grudge, new punishment. It's seasonal. You and Io exchange a look. Echo? She asks. What did she do? Spoke too much. Hermes shrugs. Spoke too well, actually. You know Hera. Doesn't like being out-narrated. You sigh. So she's someone else's problem now. Until next season, Hermes smirks. The air is cooler that night. The Nile glows silver under the moonlight. The priests light rows of oil lamps along the temple walls, their flames flickering in the breeze like whispering secrets. You sit with Io in silence, watching the water drift by. You think it's really over? She finally asks. You pause. The cow part? Probably. The divine drama? Maybe not. Io leans back, arms crossed behind her head. I think I could live with being boring again. You smile. Sorry, you're far past boring. You crossed the sea, got turned into a god, and survived Hera's wrath. At best, you're mythically average now. She snorts, then laughs. It's the kind of laugh that belongs to someone finally reclaiming her own voice after it's been mooed out of her for weeks. Eventually, Hermes rises. I'll be off then, he says, stretching. There's a statue of me in Delphi that's suspiciously unflattering. I need to file a divine complaint. You wave him off. Try not to start a new myth on the way. He salutes. No promises. And then he's gone, vanished into the breeze, leaving behind only the faint scent of citrus and divine sarcasm. You sit with Io for a while longer. She stares at the stars. You swear they're brighter here. Do you think they'll remember the real story? She asks. The girl, not just the cow? You nod. I will. And in this moment, quiet, warm, safe, you both understand that myth has never really been about what's accurate. It's about what lingers. And somewhere between the god's pettiness, the peacock's stares, and the sting of one very determined fly, a girl found herself again. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Days roll into weeks, and the temple rhythm becomes familiar. You wake with the sun. You sweep petals from the courtyard. You sip something between tea and soup, while priests hum awkwardly off-key chants that somehow always involve cows, the moon, or the divine journey of transformation, which is a polite way of saying, we know you used to moo. Io's popularity doesn't fade, it matures. No longer just the one who arrived from the sea. She's now known as Lady of Renewal, she who crossed worlds, and your personal favorite, the goddess who just wanted a nap. That last one hasn't caught on with the clergy, but you're working on it. She doesn't act like a goddess. She teaches children how to braid vines into crowns. She learns the names of the temple cooks. She even negotiates for fewer daily offerings of milk. I get the symbolism, she says, but this is bordering on ironic cruelty. Her story begins to spread. Merchants from far cities tell versions of it with their own flourishes. In one, she was never a cow, but a phoenix disguised in mortal form. In another, she and the gadfly fell in love and eloped across the sky. You listen to them all and try not to laugh. Io just shrugs. Could have been worse, she says. They could have kept the udders in the statue. Still, it's not all garlands and papyrus poetry. Being remembered comes with a cost. A delegation arrives from a nearby region. Elegantly dressed priests bearing gifts and scrolls. They kneel before Io and ask for her blessing on a new river ritual. You watch her freeze slightly, then compose herself and agree with the kind of grace only someone who once ate wildflowers for breakfast can manage. Later, she sits beside you on the temple steps and stares into the sunset. Do you think I'm still me? She asks softly. You don't answer right away. I think you're more you now than you ever were before, you finally say. And that probably makes the gods nervous. She smiles, but her eyes are far away. You don't say what you're both thinking. That Hera hasn't sent a single sign since the transformation ended. That Zeus's silence is almost too silent. That Hermes hasn't dropped by with one of his cryptic snack-based metaphors in over a week. You wonder, is the drama really over? Historians still debate whether the rest of Io's life was peaceful, or whether more divine nonsense found her later. Some say she became fully divine, ascending into the stars. Others say she returned to Greece in disguise and lived as a simple healer by the sea. A few even claim she vanished entirely, taking her story with her into the mist. But here and now, in this version of her myth, she is grounded, quiet, and very much alive. One morning, the high priestess arrives with a scroll in trembling hands. It's from across the sea, a message carved in gold leaf, from Hera. Io unrolls it slowly. You peer over her shoulder. The message is brief, chillingly so. Let the girl have her peace. I have no further interest. H. That's it. No lightning, no curses. No veiled threats hidden in floral language, just a single line. You both stare at it, then at each other. Io folds the scroll and tosses it into the brazier. She finally got bored, she says. You nod. Or she's waiting for you to make the next move. Io smirks. Then I won't. Peace, it turns out, is an act of rebellion. In a world of gods and myths and thunderclouds, choosing stillness, anonymity, rest, that's where the real power lies. You spend the next few days not looking over your shoulder, not scanning the skies for feathers or storm clouds, not waiting for the next divine shoe to drop. Instead, you help paint a mural. This time, it's Io standing in a field, fully human, eyes lifted to the stars, surrounded not by priests or thrones, but by wild flowers and cattle. A soft tribute, a quiet truth. She approves. That night, the two of you sit by the river, watching torches flicker along the water's edge. A crocodile blinks at you lazily from the shallows. A boat drifts past with a flute player softly humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like one of Hermes's lullabies. I think I'm ready, Io says. For what? To stop being the girl who turned into a cow, she answers. To just be the girl who kept going. You raise your cup. To the girl who kept going. And under the silver gaze of the stars, Io toasts her freedom. Not the kind gifted by gods, the kind you take back for yourself. You don't expect a parade, which is why the one that shows up takes you completely off guard. It starts modestly, just a few townspeople bringing baskets of fruit and singing half-remembered odes. But by midday, there are drums, dancers, and a man in a very elaborate bird costume declaring himself the herald of the cow star. Io gives you a long look. I swear I didn't organize this, you say, even as someone tries to put gold bracelets on your ankles. Apparently, word has spread beyond Egypt. Travelers from across the Mediterranean have heard about the girl turned cow turned goddess, turned somehow not mad about it. They come not just to gawk, but to learn, to hear her story, to ask her for advice, blessings, or, in the case of one elderly merchant, to help identify a rash. That's not divine, she tells him kindly. That's just cinnamon allergy. At first, she's gracious. She listens, she smiles, she blesses babies. But over time, you see the edges fray. The stories grow more elaborate. One traveler insists she sprouted wings during her escape. Another claims she swallowed a thunderbolt. A child points at her and says, "That's the one who talks to cows." You find her in the garden that night, throwing pebbles into the pond. I didn't do half the things they say, she mutters, but they look at me like I should. You sit beside her. They need a story, you say, and you gave them a good one, but that doesn't mean you have to play it forever. She flicks a pebble with a little more force than necessary. Then what am I supposed to be now? You pause. A woman who outlived her myth. That quiets her, in a good way. Historians still debate whether this was the turning point in Io's legacy, when she began to transition from legend to symbol. Some say this is when the stories mellowed, the temples quieted, and the chants softened into lullabies. Others insist she built a city, led a revolution, and turned into a constellation. Honestly, You don't think she had the energy for any of that. You know the truth. She took a walk. One morning, without ceremony or heralds or divine butterflies, she put on a linen shawl, packed some dates in a cloth pouch, and just walked away. You, of course, follow. You travel light, moving through farmlands and riverside markets where no one recognizes her. She walks with her head down, hair tied back, eyes focused on the horizon, not in shame, but in freedom. For once, she's not being chased, not being praised, not being watched by 100 blinking eyes. She's just a girl walking beside a friend. You sleep under fig trees, bathe in spring-fed pools, eat food cooked over quiet fires. One night, she laughs, really laughs, at something small, a lizard stealing a grape. It's the kind of laugh that doesn't carry a single echo of moo. Eventually, you come to a village, small, peaceful, full of normal problems like leaky roofs and stubborn donkeys. The people are kind. They don't ask questions. They offer you a place to stay in exchange for stories and help in the fields. Io agrees. She takes a job pressing olives. You learn to carve wooden combs. For the first time in a long while, your lives feel unremarkable. And it is glorious. Occasionally, someone recognizes her, or thinks they do. You look like the goddess Io, they whisper. She smiles and shrugs. People say that, that's all. You find it funny that the thing she ran from, divinity, attention, worship, is the very thing that lets her hide in plain sight now. A myth so large it turns invisible up close. One evening, the village children beg for a bedtime tale. You begin to tell them the old version of her story, just for fun. But Io interrupts. "Let me try," she says. And she does. Softly, carefully. She tells the story not as tragedy or miracle, but as comedy. A girl who got turned into a cow because a god fell in love with her, and his wife was jealous, and also deeply creative with punishments. The kids giggle. One asks if she ever learned to moo like a real cow. Io moos, expertly. They cheer. And when they ask what happened next, she smiles and says, "She got away. That's all. No gods, no battles, no monuments. She just got away." You sit beside her under the stars later, and she turns to you. "I think I like being folklore." You smile. "It's a better job than priestess." She nudges you with her foot. Still not sure about the cow shrine, though. Too late. It's probably already franchised. She groans, but she's laughing. And somewhere far, far away, on a mountain covered in mist and petty grudges, Hera might hear that laugh and roll her eyes. But she doesn't come. And Zeus, wherever he is, stays quiet. And Hermes? He's probably telling the story somewhere, embellishing it with talking frogs and magical cheese, because Hermes. But you know the truth. She got away. And she lived. And no one, not a fly, not a god, not a 100-eyed trivia monster, can take that from her. You've been in the village for almost a season now. The days stretch warm and slow, filled with dust motes, olive oil, and the soft rhythm of life uninterrupted. Io is no longer Io the cursed, or Io the cow, or even Io the almost goddess. Around here, she's just Io, the one who knows how to stack olive crates so they don't fall over, who can coax a stubborn goat into milking with nothing but a hum. No divine glow, no shrines, just calloused hands and easy smiles. You think she likes it that way. So do you. The village is simple, but it has its own kind of poetry. There's an old man who insists the moon tastes like fennel, a woman who swears her donkey talks to ghosts, and a pair of twins who are convinced they're actually the reincarnated spirits of ancient heroes, but only on Wednesdays. You help build a new well. Io plants fig trees. At night, the two of you sit under a woven canopy, passing a skin of wine back and forth, watching the stars emerge like gossiping fireflies. Occasionally, travelers pass through, peddlers, poets, a goat that may or may not belong to anyone. They bring news from the world beyond. Hera has taken a new favorite, one murmurs. There's talk of a great war brewing across the sea, says another. Someone mentions a new temple being built in Argos, this one with no cows involved. Io listens, always polite, always distant. These things don't touch her now. They pass like shadows over still water. Until one morning, you hear shouting. You rush out to see a boy, barefoot, breathless, holding a scrap of parchment in shaking hands. He's not from the village. His tunic is torn, his eyes too wide. Are you the goddess Io? He asks. Io steps forward slowly. Not anymore, she says. The boy shoves the parchment toward her. You have to come. They need you. You glance at the paper. It's smudged, hastily written, and carries the seal of an ancient temple you haven't seen in years. Someone is invoking her name. Io sighs, deep and long, the way someone exhales when they thought they were done with something, and that something comes knocking again. You and she sit on the porch that evening, the parchment between you like a sleeping serpent. I could ignore it, she says. You could, you reply. But you won't. She closes her eyes. I don't want to be worshipped. I don't want to be feared. I just want to live. You nod. But the people asking, they might not be asking for a goddess. They might just be asking for you. Historians still debate what happened next. Some scrolls claim Io returned to Greece in disguise, bringing peace to a land divided. Others say she never left Egypt, fading into local folklore until even her name dissolved into the river reeds. One fragment suggests she became a wandering healer, anonymous but unforgettable, turning up in every major city just before a plague ended. But none of them mention what happened that night under the fig tree. Io took the parchment, rolled it gently, and placed it in the fire. They want a myth, she said. Let them make one. You stare at the flames with her, watching the seal curl and blacken. You sure? I'm done running, she says, but I'm also done obeying. You smile. That's very undivine of you. I'll take that as a compliment. The boy leaves the next day with a basket of dates and a politely vague story about how the goddess is meditating and cannot be disturbed until the stars realign. He seems satisfied. And you feel something loosen. That night, Io paints a picture on the side of your little cottage, a mural of a cow standing in a field of stars, her tail swishing, her gaze fixed calmly on the horizon. No lightning, no wings, no priests, just peace. The children of the village name her Stella and give her flowers every week. Io never corrects them. You both grow older, quietly, wonderfully. She takes up beekeeping, because of course she does. You learn to play an instrument with 2 strings and no name. The neighbors complain, but kindly. Years pass like pages. Sometimes someone will mention the story, the cow who crossed the world, and Io will just smile, shrug and say, "Never met her." One night, you're both sitting on the roof, watching a comet trail fire across the sky. "You think they ever forgave me?" she asks. You glance over. Who? Hera, the gods, the people who wrote all those stories. You tilt your head. I think they forgot. She nods slowly. Even better. And the 2 of you sit there in the stillness of obscurity, watching the stars flicker and fade. Because not every myth needs a dramatic ending. Some just get to rest. You always assumed that when someone outlived a myth, they just stopped being part of the story. But the truth is, myth has a long memory. Even when you think you've wandered far enough, laid low long enough, worn enough dust to blur your shape, there's always someone chasing the echo of your name. It starts with a coin. One of the village children finds it near the riverbank, bronze, worn. On one side, a cow with a crown of stars. On the other, an inscription in ancient script that you can't quite read, but Io can. She stares at it too long. "That's my face," she says. "Sort of." And then she laughs, not bitter, just tired. They've minted me now. A few days later, a trader arrives with a bundle of fabrics and a handful of tales. He's heard of a place, a port city, far to the north, where they've begun offering sacrifices again. To her, a new priesthood is forming, complete with ceremonial reeds and an interpretive dance involving fig branches. You almost choke on your tea. Io doesn't flinch. "That didn't take long," she murmurs. She tries to ignore it. Truly she does. She returns to her bees, her morning herb walks, her quietly suspicious goat named Melon. But you see her growing restless. She stares at the horizon more often now, brow furrowed. One night, under the buzzing hush of stars, she finally speaks. "I thought I was finished," she says. "I really did." You nudge her shoulder. "Maybe you are." She shakes her head. "But the story isn't." You consider that, and you realize she's right. Because even if she is finished being a goddess, a cow, a cursed echo of divine jealousy, the myth of Io has taken on a life of its own. It's walking around out there, gathering details, rewriting itself with every retelling. People are adding things, wings, prophecies, romance. "Apparently," Io mutters, "I had a tragic love affair with Poseidon. He built me a palace under the sea." You blink. "Did he?" "I'm allergic to oysters." You both stare into the fire for a while. "I don't want to go back," she says. "Then don't," you reply. "But what if they come here?" You sigh. "They probably will." Historians still debate how far the cult of Io spread. Some say it remained local, a faint echo in desert towns and riverside shrines. Others claim it became foundational, folded into Egyptian theology, Persian folklore, even early Roman legends. Some called her the first exile, others, the cow star goddess who walked through punishment and emerged as power. But you remember the girl who mooed apologetically, who ran from flies, who used to talk to olive trees when she thought no one was listening. You remember her before the worship. The following week, a small caravan appears at the edge of the village. They carry no symbols, wear no robes, just travel-worn clothes and sunburned faces. They kneel before her, heads bowed. "We've come for guidance," the leader says softly. "We've heard the stories. We've followed the stars. We don't need a goddess, just someone who remembers what it's like to survive." Io stands very still. Then she speaks. "No prayers," she says. "No altars, no golden statues." They nod. "Then come," she says, voice even. "But we start with chores." And just like that, the story takes another turn. She begins teaching, not as a priestess or a prophet or even a leader, just a woman who's seen too much, lived too hard, and decided to keep walking anyway. They listen, and they help. They mend roofs, build irrigation channels, cook over shared fires. One of them carves wooden cows in his spare time. Another writes songs and performs them badly. It's endearing. You watch as Io begins to smile again. Not the quiet, cautious kind, but the real one. The kind that says, "Maybe I'm not running anymore." One of the newcomers, an older woman with scarred hands, asks her, "What do we call you?" Io pauses, then answers, "Call me tired, and call me still here." It becomes a kind of joke, a new hymn, passed quietly among those who stay. She was tired, but she was still here. It spreads faster than any temple decree, because everyone understands what it means to be tired, and everyone hopes to still be here. One evening, you find Io standing at the edge of the fields, watching the wind curl through the wheat. She doesn't turn when you approach. "I never asked for the myth," she says. "I know. But maybe I can choose what it becomes." You nod. "Maybe that's what gods were supposed to do all along." She looks at you, eyes soft. "Promise me," she says. "If they rewrite the ending, you'll tell it right." You offer your hand. "Cross my heart. No wings, no underwater palaces." She takes your hand. "Good." And the two of you watch the sky deepen into indigo, quiet as the myth reshapes itself, one breath at a time. The fields turn gold as harvest nears. Io walks among them, barefoot and a sun-browned, the hem of her tunic dusty, a basket slung over one shoulder. She hums when she works, not a song of the gods or some ancient chant, but something simple, earthy. A melody picked up from a shepherd's daughter who didn't know who Io was and didn't care. You think she likes it that way. The villagers had stopped calling her Lady Io or the one from the sea. Now it's just Io. Sometimes Miss Io, if someone's trying to be polite. To the children, she's the fig lady. They don't know her story. They just know she always has snacks. One day, a boy asks, "Were you really a cow?" Io doesn't flinch. "Once," she says. "Briefly. It wasn't a lifestyle choice." The boy giggles. You both laugh. And just like that, the truth feels lighter. But not everyone is laughing. Word reaches you through whispers, traveling merchants, and a nervous pigeon with a scroll tied to its leg, that a new version of Io's myth is spreading through port cities. This one's dramatic. In it, she chooses to become a cow, chooses exile. The myth paints her as a symbol of a divine submission, a creature who bowed to the will of the gods with grace and gratitude. Io reads the scroll and snorts. They've made me polite. You're sitting beneath the olive tree when she says this. She's got ink-stained fingers and a face that says she's torn between rage and total resignation. You take the scroll. So, you're a mascot for obedient suffering now? She sighs. Apparently, they've even made a play. You stare at her. A play? The Grazing Heart. It's apparently a tragic romantic musical. You wheeze. Please tell me there's a dance number. She looks at you. Act 2 opens with a waltz called Hooves of Humility. You fall off the bench laughing. Historians still debate the impact of the Grazing Heart on later artistic traditions. Some claim it inspired entire theatrical genres of divine melodrama. Others insist it was banned in Corinth after one too many farmers protested its inaccuracy. But in your quiet village, the absurdity of it just becomes another shared joke. Io starts signing her name with little cow ears drawn above the I. You add udders to your firewood. It's cathartic. But you both know the deeper issue. The story is still not hers. Should I tell it? She asks one evening. The real version? You think? If you do, you say, they might ignore it, or twist it again. She nods. But if I don't, they'll keep making things up. So she decides to speak. Not on a grand stage, not in a scroll, not with divine echoes or thunderclouds, just around the fire. The villagers gather, she begins, and her voice is not theatrical or dramatic. It's quiet, wry, honest. She tells them how she was once a girl who worked in a temple, how a god noticed her, and she didn't have much say in that, how she was turned into something unrecognizable, how she ran, not because it was noble, but because she was scared, how she crossed seas, how she hurt, how she healed. There are no wings, no thunder, no romance with sea gods, just truth. And when she finishes, no one claps. They just sit there, quiet, moved. Later, an old woman touches her hand and says, "Thank you. That's a better story than the one with the waltzing." Io nods. It's the one I needed. Over time, the story spreads, not with flair or ceremony, but with warmth. Around other fires, in whispered bedtime tales, in the kind of songs hummed while stirring soup, the children start drawing pictures, not of Io as a cow or a goddess, but as a girl. One shows her planting fig trees. Another has her napping under a sun hat. One enthusiastic artist draws her punching a gadfly. That one goes on your wall. And slowly, the old myths begin to fade. Not disappear, just soften, like ink run through with rain. She becomes something else now. A memory wrapped in laughter. A figure whispered about by women weaving baskets. A comfort. Not a warning, not a symbol of obedience, but of resilience. You realize one day that this might be her true form. Not goddess, not cow, not myth, just witness. Someone who saw the worst of divine nonsense and came out the other side. someone who remembers and tells it kindly. That night, you sit beside her, watching the wind play in the wheat again. Are you afraid they'll twist it again? You ask. Always, she says. But this time, they'll have to twist my words. And that, you think, is something. Because once you speak your own story, truthfully, fully, it gets harder for the world to rewrite you. Not impossible, but harder. And that may be all the power we ever really need. You don't realize how many people have been waiting for her story until they start showing up. First, it's a pair of traveling singers. Young, sunburned, clutching a hand-copied version of Io's campfire tale in a scroll tube. We heard the version without the dancing cows, they say, breathless. We wanted to hear it from her. Then it's a philosopher with a crooked walking stick and 5 too many opinions. I've revised my thesis on moral agency in divine narratives, he declares, based on your first-hand testimony. Io blinks at him. I once sneezed and scared a goat into a pond, she says. That's my only testimony. The philosopher weeps. You sit with her afterward under a lemon tree, watching the latest batch of visitors pitch tents near the river. They've started calling the place Io's Bend. I didn't ask for this, she murmurs. No one ever does, you say, but I did speak. You did. And here they are. Historians later describe this moment as the second flowering of the cult of Io. They miss the irony, of course, because there are no temples here, no idols, just one woman trying to prune her fig trees while someone reads her fan poetry. To be fair, some of the poetry is good. Most of it rhymes Io with so low and don't go. One man writes an entire epic in which Io defeats Hera in a chariot race using only hooves and spite. Io reads it and mutters, "Okay, I'd watch that." The pilgrims, visitors, and curious travelers never quite overwhelm the village. They're too reverent, too grateful, and mostly too dusty to stage anything organized. They bring offerings, but not the grand kind. A carefully stitched shawl, a carved wooden bee, a wheel of cheese the size of a small goat. Melon, the actual goat, tries to fight the cheese. No one wins. At night, the fires glow brighter. The stories continue. Only now, they start with her version, the honest one, the tired one, the one where survival wasn't clean, where the journey had no hero's arc, where the ending is still unfolding. You realize that people didn't come because she was divine. They came because she was true. And truth, in a world of drama and godly tantrums, is quietly revolutionary. One evening, a girl about Io's age, curious-eyed, freckled, barefoot, asks the question everyone tiptoes around. Do you forgive them? Io doesn't ask who she means. She stares into the fire, picks up a fig, rolls it between her fingers. No, she says, but I'm not waiting for an apology anymore. The girl nods. That's fair. And that somehow feels like the most sacred thing she said all night. Historians still debate whether Io ever formally reconciled with Hera or Zeus. The myths say she was elevated, rewarded, honored. But the myths don't talk about the way she still wakes, sometimes with sweat on her brow, the way she flinches at buzzing flies, the way she never again enters a temple barefoot. You know better. You've seen the cost of godhood. You've seen her bleed, cry, laugh, moo, and survive. So when a group of earnest young scholars shows up asking to catalog her relics, Io offers them a cup of goat's milk and a rake. "You want to preserve something?" she says. "Preserve this field. It feeds people." They rake for 6 hours. It's oddly effective. Later, you find her watching the sky again. She does that more now. Not like she's waiting for divine punishment, but like she's trying to remember something. You ask what she's looking for. "My old star," she says. "They say Zeus placed one for me after everything." You believe that? I think it's poetic. Poetic's nice, but rest is better. You lean back, still thinking of leaving. She shrugs. Maybe, not to run, just to drift, like a good myth. You consider it. You think people will stop coming? Eventually. Or they'll keep coming, but they'll come for the quiet, for the truth. She reaches over and hands you a small wooden carving. It's a cow, but it's smiling. "I made you a souvenir," she says. You laugh. "I'll treasure it forever." And you will. Because in a world of marble gods and sky-bending dramas, the quiet survival of one stubborn girl who refused to let others define her might be the most powerful myth of all, especially when she's the one telling it. One morning, the bees swarm. Not dangerously, just everywhere. A low, vibrating hum rises through the fields as golden clouds spiral through the olive trees and past the well. The villagers pause what they're doing. No one is afraid. This is Io's swarm. She steps out into the sun, her shawl still half-tied, and watches them rise like smoke. "They are just stretching," she murmurs. You stand beside her, shading your eyes. Or sending a message. To who? To whoever's still listening. Because someone always is. That afternoon, a scroll arrives, bound in gold-threaded silk, sealed with wax that smells like cedar wood and ego. You both know who it's from before she opens it. It's from Zeus. His handwriting is overly flourished, the kind of script that thinks it's impressive, but is mostly exhausting. You read over her shoulder. "My dearest Io, it has come to my attention that your story has regained traction among mortals. While I, of course, support your right to shape your own narrative, I would be remiss if I did not remind you of the events as they truly occurred." Io groans. He's footnoting my trauma. You glance ahead in the scroll. He's included a timeline with weather annotations. And so, given your unique position as both mortal and divine adjacent, I am extending an invitation for you to return to Olympus as a guest of honor. I trust you will find the conditions improved. She doesn't finish reading it. She tosses the scroll into the goat trough. Melon immediately begins chewing on it. "I don't want to be a guest," she says. "I was a guest. That's how all this started." You nod. Later that evening, she sends a message back, short. No flourishes, no timeline. "Thank you for the offer. I decline. My story is mine now. No lightning follows, no thunder, not even a passing cloud." It's possible Zeus didn't expect her to reply. Or maybe he respects it. Or maybe Hera read the reply and told him to leave it alone. You'll never know. That night, you find her in the garden, planting lavender beside the fig trees. Do you ever miss it? You ask. The magic? She wipes her hands on her tunic. Sometimes, she says, but magic didn't save me. People did. Time did. Dirt did. She presses a seedling into the soil. I like things that grow slow. You sit beside her and help press the next one into place. Later, as dusk falls, the village gathers again. No announcement, no festival. Just quiet faces, small laughter, the shared comfort of routine. Someone strums a lyre. A child begins humming a tune about a cow who crossed the sea. But this version ends not in tragedy or transformation, but in fig trees and honey. You lean over to Io. Do you want to say anything? She shakes her head. They already know the story. They're living it now. And that perhaps is what's changed the most. Once she was a myth told about. Now she's a life told with. That evening, she writes something on a scrap of bark and tucks it into a jar. When you ask what it is, she shrugs. Just a thought. You peek later. It says, not everything has to be a lesson. Some things are just endurance. The next morning, she wakes early, braids her hair, packs a satchel with a loaf of bread, a fig, and a small carving of a bee. I think I'll wander for a bit, she tells you. You don't ask why, you just nod. You want company? You ask. She smiles. Eventually, but this part's mine. And with that, she sets off, walking calmly toward the horizon. No storms, no divine summons, no curses trailing behind her. Just a woman with tired feet and an unclaimed future. And as the sun rises behind her, painting the fields in gold and rose, you understand. The myth was never about the cow. It was about what happens after. Weeks pass, maybe months. You can't tell exactly. Life in the village has that dreamy softness now, like everything's been slightly slowed, wrapped in linen and left out in the sun to dry. Io is gone for now. Not vanished, just gone walking, as the villagers say. You think about her a lot. So does everyone else. But not in the way they used to, with questions and awe. Now it's gentler. A kind of smiling memory that drifts between conversations like the scent of baking bread. Remember when she tamed a goat with just a glare? Did she really name her favorite bee Aristotle? Do you think she'll come back? The answer to that last one is always the same. She never really left. You still have the wooden cow she carved you. It lives on the windowsill now, next to the jar of fig jam and the lemon peel you've been pretending isn't too old to use. It watches the road, just in case she shows up again with more stories, more questions, or just to complain about the latest inaccurate mural. And you've become the story keeper, not the chosen one, not the epic narrator, just the person who was there, the one who remembers which parts were funny, which parts hurt, and which parts are best left as gentle silences. One evening, a new visitor arrives. She's young, dusty, eyes wide. She sits beside you near the fire with a bundle of crumpled notes in her lap. Is it true, she asks, that she walked across the world, that she spoke with gods, that she forgave Hera? You smile. She walked, yes. She survived gods, but the forgiveness part, she gave that to herself, not them. The girl nods. trying to scribble that down. You hand her a fig. Some stories don't need to be written down, just carried. She blinks, confused. Carried? You tap your chest. Here, like bees carry pollen. Let it change you, not just quote you. She stops writing. That's how you know she understood. Historians will one day argue over which version of the Io legend is canonical. The tragic epic, the bizarre romance, the stubborn exile-turned honey farmer. But you sit with the version that matters, the one where a girl refuses to let the worst thing that happened to her become her only identity. And that version keeps growing. You see it in the way the village changes. There's a new mural now, not of Io as a cow or goddess, but as a woman planting trees, her foot resting on a coiled scroll she clearly doesn't care to open. Children have started carving wooden bees instead of bulls. One merchant insists on calling figs Io's fruit. It's a branding nightmare, but no one argues. Even Melon the goat seems more dignified now. One night, during a particularly sleepy full moon, you dream of her. She's sitting beneath a fig tree, hair long, eyes amused. She says nothing, just looks at you, then holds out a handful of seeds. You wake up with dirt on your hands. You plant a fig tree that morning. Later that week, a letter arrives. It's unsigned, but the handwriting is unmistakable. Simple, steady, with a faint smear of honey along the edge. The stars are quiet tonight. No messages, no omens, just sky. I watched the tide go out for hours. The ocean doesn't care what I used to be. That might be the best worship I've ever received. Still walking, you reread it a dozen times. And that night, when someone asks you to tell the story again, the real one, you don't begin with the cow. You begin with the silence afterward. You say, she once thought her life ended when they rewrote her into something she didn't choose. But the truth is, her life began the day she walked away from the version they wrote for her. You pause, and the rest she writes herself. And as you speak, the fire crackles low. The stars flicker like old paper. And somewhere across a desert, or a sea, or maybe just a few days' walk from your door, Io keeps going. Not toward legend, but toward herself. The rains return. It happens overnight. Soft at first, like a sigh against the roof that you almost mistake for wind. Then stronger, fuller. The dry season gives up its grip, and the earth drinks gratefully. Everything smells like clay and renewal. You sit on the steps with a shawl over your shoulders and watch puddles gather around the fig trees. Bees duck into the cracks of the walls. Melon the goat sulks under the cart, deeply offended by the concept of moisture. You think of Io. She loved the rain, even when it turned the garden into a swamp, even when it made the olive harvest twice as long. At least it doesn't buzz and sting, she'd say. The village, too, changes under the rain. Softer voices, slower movements, a kind of collective exhale. You wonder if they're thinking of her too. Of course they are. They always do. When the sky remembers her. That's the thing about myths. They're like seeds. Even when forgotten, they're only sleeping. And Io's myth, it's blooming again. But this time, it's not centralized. It's not statues or scrolls. It's whispered, carried, planted. You hear her name in places you didn't expect. A passing traveler tells you of a coastal village where a woman with sun-browned skin and clever hands fixed their irrigation system with nothing but reeds and curses. A young boy from the northern market says he met a fig witch who could name every flower by taste. A sailor swears he saw her standing at the edge of the sea, barefoot in the surf, speaking to the waves as though they were old friends. None of them describe her as a cow. None call her divine. They just call her Io. You write these stories down, not to preserve them, but to remind yourself how wide a life can spread when you stop controlling it. One day, you're sorting jars in the kitchen when you find something tucked behind a loose stone, a folded scrap of parchment. No signature, just a single sentence written in familiar script. I used to be a myth. Now I'm a garden. You press it to your chest. You don't cry. Not quite. Instead, you go outside, dig your fingers into the soft post-rain soil, and plant another fig tree. Later, a child asks you if the tree has a name. You say, call it endurance. And that becomes a tradition. Each new sapling in the village gets a name. Rest, silence, salt, survival, laughing alone, thunder free, second bloom. Years pass this way. The village is never grand, never famous, but it becomes a kind of refuge, a place people find when they need to unbecome something, when they've been turned into cows by the world, metaphorically or otherwise. No one says it like that, of course, but they all feel it. You become the quiet guide, the fig jam maker, the one who knows how to boil away bad dreams with mint and heat and good bread. You speak of Io less, but you carry her more. In your shoulders, your patience, the way you wait for people to say what hurts without pushing them. Then one spring morning she returns. No lightning, no procession. Just a woman with wind in her hair and dust on her boots, walking down the old path as though she never left it. You spot her through the window and drop your cup. She sees you, grins, and opens her arms. Miss me? You sprint across the yard, shawl flying behind you. She's real, warm, alive, still here. You sit beneath the old fig tree, the one you named in her honor, and she tells you stories. Not the kind with gods or vengeance, but of strange soup recipes from northern markets, of a man who tried to sell her a sacred lizard, of a town where no one speaks, only whistles. I think I'm ready to stay, she says after a while. You nod. You've always had a place. She touches the tree trunk beside you. What's this one called? You smile. Resilience. She leans her head against the bark. Sounds like me. And in that quiet moment, under the shade of a tree grown from the slow bloom of healing, you understand. Io is no longer running from her myth. She's walking alongside it. And wherever she goes next, the story will follow, but only if she lets it. Which, now, she finally can. With Io home again, the village exhales. You feel it everywhere. In the way the baker hums while kneading dough, in the way the elders play slower games of bones under the tree, in the way the bees hum louder as if they're catching up on gossip. Io doesn't try to reclaim anything. She doesn't retake her old house. She doesn't correct how people remember her. She simply slides back into the rhythm as if she never left. She moves into a small hut on the east edge of the fields, closer to the sunrise, she says, and further from any goats. Melon is unimpressed. You visit often. She never locks the door. There's always tea brewing, herbs drying from the rafters, and some new half-finished project on her table. A carved spoon, a stitched pouch, a smoothed river stone with symbols etched into the back. When you ask what the symbols mean, she shrugs. Memories or nonsense, I don't remember. You think she remembers. One afternoon, you bring her a fresh jar of fig jam, and she hands you a scroll. It's handwritten, untitled, messy. What's this? You ask. She sips her tea. Something I started while I was away. Might be a book, might be compost. You unroll it. The first line reads, "There once was a girl who wasn't given a choice, so she made her own." You keep reading. It's raw, honest. Some of it's funny. Some of it's quiet fury. And none of it tries to sound mythical. It's just hers. I want to give it away, she says. Not publish, just pass it around like seeds. You nod. You want me to start? Of course, she smirks. You're the one who knows how to fold them. So you do. You make copies. Imperfect, slightly lopsided, but made with care. You tuck them into baskets of fruit sent to nearby villages. You give one to a traveling merchant who promises to leave it in a tea house far to the west. You hand another to a young woman who says, "I've felt like a cow for years." The story spreads, not like wildfire, but like ivy, quiet, clinging, persistent. Some people don't believe it, others do. A few send back letters with their own stories scribbled in the margins, tales of surviving small gods, of walking away from altars, of learning how to say no to something carved in stone. Io reads each one. Some she hangs on the wall. Some she burns in a small ceremony that involves wine and muttered curses. It's not for everyone, she says, but it was for someone. That's enough. One day, you find her in the garden talking to a group of children. She's holding a wooden cow figurine and explaining how not to let anyone ride you across a continent. They're enthralled. You watch from a distance, hands in your pockets, heart full. This is the new myth now. Not divine punishment, not romantic suffering, but storytelling, healing, community. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls faintly. You both look up. She smiles. Let them thunder. She stands, brushes dirt off her knees and looks at you. You still keeping track? She asks. Always. Good. Because next week, I'm telling them the one about the time I tried to escape a swarm by jumping in a goat cart. You laugh. Was that real? She lifts a brow. Would it matter? And that's the truth, isn't it? Because the line between myth and memory has always been thin. And if the story helps someone stand taller, laugh louder, plant a fig tree, does it really matter if every detail is accurate? You decide it doesn't. Io walks back to her hut as the kids follow, still laughing, still asking questions. The sun dips low, casting long golden rays over the fields, and for the first time, the myth feels lighter, like it belongs to everyone now. especially her. It begins with a name whispered on the wind, not Io. At first, it's subtle. A traveling sculptor stops in the village and, while sharing soup, asks if you've heard of the woman who refused the gods. He doesn't say Io, doesn't mention cows or Hera or gadflies. Just that title. You glance at him, then toward the garden, where she's teaching 3 children how to dye fabric with beetroot. I might have heard something, you say. The sculptor smiles, pulls out a clay figurine, small, rounded, faceless. Just a woman standing, 1 foot forward, head held high. It looks like her, and also like anyone. That's the point, he says. She's all of us now. You bring the story to Io that night. She reads the sculptor's version, stripped of details, polished like a river stone, simple and poetic. She blinks. This one doesn't even have bees in it. He was probably afraid to sculpt them. She laughs, long and loose. Good. Let the myth wander. And wander it does. You hear echoes everywhere. In a port city market, someone sells pendants called Steps of Refusal. In a hillside village, girls paint their faces with fig juice in a coming-of-age ceremony they call Cow's Crossing. A priestess writes a hymn titled, She Who Left the Altar. None of them say Io's name, but you see her in all of it, and so does she. At first, you think it might bother her, being rewritten again, abstracted into symbol, diluted. But one evening, you find her standing on the ridge above the village, watching a group of young travelers below reenact her escape from Argus, using clay masks and an impressively uncoordinated dance. She smiles. Look at them, she murmurs, making nonsense from survival. Isn't that what stories are, you ask? Yes, she says. But this time, it's not just mine. Later, she adds to her scroll, now nearly a book. On the last page, she writes, Let them call me whatever they need. Let the story shift its shape. I will not correct the ones who find themselves in my silence. You copy it and place it on your wall. She no longer minds being unnamed. She minds being misunderstood. But now somehow the world is understanding her more, not less. Not perfectly, but deeply. One day, a girl arrives carrying a bundle of letters. She doesn't ask for Io. She doesn't bow or whisper. She simply walks up and says, I've walked through 3 cities with this story in my bag. I thought I'd be giving it away, but I think I've just been carrying it home. Io invites her in for soup. They speak for hours, quietly, openly, not of gods or cows or punishment, but of fear, of silence, of what it means to wake up and not feel like you belong in your own body because someone else claimed it. You listen from the doorway. The fire is low, the tea is sweet. And somewhere between one sentence and the next, you feel a new story begin. After the girl leaves, Io says, She never said myth once. You nod. Maybe she didn't need to. And you realize something else. What started as a cautionary tale, then bloomed into a rebellion, has now become something softer, companionable. No longer Io, the cow, no longer Io, the survivor, but Io, the presence. She begins traveling again, but differently this time, not to flee, not to wander, but to visit. to sit in silence with people who've forgotten their own names, to remind them that walking away is sometimes the holiest thing a person can do. Historians don't document this part. It's too quiet, too personal, too full of warm rooms and shared loaves and nods that mean more than pages ever could. But you do. In the margins of your own growing scrolls, you write, "She is not just the girl who ran from the god. She is the girl who walked back to herself." And when people come asking, hungry for miracles, you hand them a story that begins not with thunder, but with tired feet and an open door. It happens on a clear evening, one of those rare nights where the moon hangs huge and golden over the fields, as if it, too, is listening. Io sits beneath the fig tree, her shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. You're beside her, feet bare in the dirt, 2 mugs of something warm and herbal between you. The bees have long gone quiet. Even the goats have tucked themselves in. She's humming, something you've never heard before. "What is that?" you ask. "A lullaby," she says, "for myself." You don't interrupt, you just listen. It's not complicated. 4 or 5 notes repeating, drifting through the branches like they've always belonged there. The kind of tune that sticks in the edges of your mind and curls up to sleep. "I used to hum when I was a cow," she says after a while, without irony. Not because it helped anything, just because it reminded me I still had a voice, even if no one heard it. You nod. "But now they do." She looks at you. "Do they?" You pause. They hear a version, some louder than others, but yeah, they hear it. She sips her tea. "Even Hera." You raise an eyebrow. "You want her to?" She shrugs. "Not really. Just wondering if she listens when no one's praising her." You both fall silent again. Then softly, Io says something you weren't expecting. "I think I'm ready." "For what?" "To let go of it. All of it." You blink. "The story." "No, the need for the story." You sit with that. "You're not afraid people will forget?" She smiles. "I hope they do, eventually." That's how healing works. When the story stops hurting, when it just becomes a place you pass through, you reach over and squeeze her hand. She returns the squeeze. That week, she starts giving things away. Little by little. The wooden carvings, the scrolls, even the infamous pebble she once claimed was the exact one she tripped over while fleeing Argus. "I kept it for humility," she'd say, which is a very humble brag thing to say. Each item goes to someone new, not as relics, but as tools. The girl who dreams of writing gets the scrolls. The boy who talks to plants gets the herb jars. The goat gets the pebble, naturally. When people ask why, she simply says, "I don't want to carry it all anymore." And when they ask what she'll keep, she points to the fig tree. "That," she says. "And maybe the jam recipe." You watch her over the days that follow, not diminishing, but distilling. She becomes quieter, yes, but not from withdrawal, from peace. People still come to her, sit beside her, listen, but fewer ask for the full story now. They just want to be near someone who understands what it means to begin again. One night, a young woman asks you a question. What was she like before it all happened? You think, You try to remember, but you realize that's not your story to tell. So you answer honestly, I don't know, but I know who she became, and that was enough. And maybe that's the point, that she's no longer a lesson or a warning or a footnote in divine history. She's a becoming, the sound of what happens after the thunder fades, the warmth that lingers after myth becomes memory. That evening, Io sits beneath the stars, writing something in the dirt with a stick. You lean over and read it. I was a girl, I was a cow, I was tired, now I am here. You sit beside her, shoulder to shoulder. Two small creatures, wrapped in the stillness of a story that no longer needs to be told, only lived. You wake to birdsong and the smell of warm earth. Io is already outside, barefoot, humming again. She's planting something new today. Small shoots in a spiral pattern, marking each one with a flat river stone. You ask what they are. Wild fennel, she says. Tough, a little bitter, but useful. You nod, squint at the spiral. It's not your usual rouse. I'm not my usual anything, she replies, wiping her hands on her tunic. You smile and hand her a cup of tea. She takes it without looking, eyes still on the earth. You know that look. It's the look of someone who's planning something inward. Later that morning, she pulls a wooden box from under her cot. I think it's time to bury this, she says. Inside are the last pieces of her old life. The old pendant from the temple in Argos, a clay cow figurine made by a child who thought she should have wings, a scroll bearing the original hymn to Io of the storm, a half-burned message from Zeus you'd once tried to use as kindling and were swiftly stopped. You follow her beyond the fig grove, past the old goat path, to a place between two cypress trees. The soil is soft, familiar. You dig together. No ceremony, no chant. Just the sound of moving earth and shared silence. She places each item in the hole like it's a thank you note, not a burial. I'm not forgetting, she says. I'm just giving them back. You cover it. Smooth the ground. Place one round stone on top. Nothing written on it. Just weight. Presence. Back in the village, no one asks where you went, but they know. That night, someone leaves a tiny wreath of fig leaves on your doorstep. Another leaves a carved bee. The village knows when to speak and when to listen. They've learned from her. You wake the next morning to laughter. Io is chasing Melon through the courtyard with a broom. The goat has stolen one of her spiral seedling markers and refuses to be reasoned with. I was trying to be symbolically peaceful, she yells. You laugh so hard you choke on your tea. And that's how the village learns the next chapter of her story. Io and the Goat of Chaos. There's already a song by sunset. Later, as the fire burns low, Io pulls out a clean scrap of parchment and begins writing again. She doesn't hide it this time. When you peek over her shoulder, you expect something profound. Instead, the title reads, Things I'd Rather Be Than a Goddess. A beekeeper. A soup taster. The breeze before a thunderstorm, not the thunder. The one who opens the door, not the one knocking. Forgotten and free. Me, just me. Still here. You grin. Wanna add goat wrangler? She nods solemnly. Put it under soup taster. You write it in, She folds the parchment, places it in a jar, and tucks it next to the window where the morning light always lands. "This one's for me," she says, "and maybe for whoever comes next. Because someone always does. Another girl, another boy, another tired soul who's been rewritten, renamed, reduced. They'll show up, and they'll need a story. Not the old one, but this one. The one where the myth bends, breaks, blooms again. The one where the ending isn't written by gods, but by the person who lived it." Io leans back, arms crossed behind her head, gaze on the stars. "Do you think they'll make another version of me someday?" she asks. "They already have," you say. "But this one, this version, is the only one with fennel seeds and goat battles." She laughs, and somewhere in the dark, the myth exhales, no longer thunderous, just steady and very much alive. Autumn creeps in softly, not with bluster or storm, but with the slow gold of fig leaves, the hush of early twilight, and the weight of chill creeping into your shawl before you're ready. The village shifts with the season. So does Io. She starts waking earlier again, not restless, just attentive. She walks the fields before dawn, hands brushing the drying stalks, humming under her breath. Sometimes she returns with pockets full of fallen walnuts or a half-frozen snail she cradles briefly before setting it gently on a stone. Everything slows down, she tells you one morning over roasted barley tea. It's a good time for remembering. You think she means it for herself, but you take the hint. That afternoon, you begin rereading your old notes. Not the scrolls of her journey, the published myths, the musical reimaginings, the interpretations with suspiciously sexy cows, but your notes, the ones written during the worst nights, the funny asides, the half-finished sentences. You'd nearly forgotten some of them. She was shivering, not from fear, from memory. Her tail knocked over a brazier. We both screamed. She said, "I don't want to be wise. I want to be done." You bring them to her. She reads in silence. When she finishes, she places the pages in her lap, hands still. Then she looks at you. "I was angry," she says. "Sometimes I still am." "Good," you reply. "Good?" "Yeah, that means you're not pretending it didn't happen." She thinks about that for a while. "I don't think people want the real story," she finally says. "They want something clean, something triumphant. They want it to end with a crown," you say, "or a temple." She smirks. "All I ever wanted was to not be followed by a bug." You both laugh, but you know what she means. That evening, she calls a gathering. Nothing formal. Just a sit and listen under the fig tree. Word spreads. People bring blankets, roasted seeds, jars of honeyed water. Even the children quiet down. And Io speaks. Not like a priestess, not like a goddess. Just like a woman with a story that never quite finished telling itself. She starts at the middle. The moment she realized she was alone in a body that wasn't hers. She doesn't describe every detail, just the feeling, like standing in a room full of mirrors that all lie. She tells them about Argus, about the silence, about the buzzing, about wanting to give up. She tells them about reaching Egypt and how being worshipped can feel almost identical to being imprisoned if no one sees you inside the gold. She tells them about the moment she turned back, the relief, the grief, the terrible, miraculous weight of being herself again. She says, I wasn't saved by the gods. I was saved by time, dirt, friends, breathing, and the refusal to disappear. And no one speaks. No one can. When it ends, no one claps. They just sit with it. You watch her, quiet, calm, sitting cross-legged in the leaf litter, and you know, this wasn't for them, it was for her. Later, someone slips a note into your hand. Thank you for not turning it into a miracle. You keep that one. That night, you and Io sit in silence again, watching clouds drift across the moon. Do you think, she says, that people can be myth without being metaphor? You think a moment. I think the moment they speak their truth and are still believed, that's the myth made human. She nods. She doesn't write anything down that night. She just goes to bed early and dreams for once of nothing at all. The first frost arrives quietly. You wake to a thin shimmer on the fig leaves, the dew turned to silver lace. The garden crunches beneath your feet, and even the bees hesitate, moving slower now, their tiny wings ticking like tired clocks. Io stands in the field already, wrapped in 3 shawls and sipping something steaming from a carved cup. She's watching the horizon as if waiting for it to open up and to tell her something new. You step beside her, hands in your sleeves. Cold, you say. She nods. Finally, there's a strange kind of peace in the frost, the kind that only comes when the harvest is finished, the seeds are stored, and the world agrees to be still. It's the season of staying, of softness, of longer silences and thicker soups. You both lean into it. Inside, she's begun mending everything, blankets, old scarves, relationships. One day, she walks across the village to visit a woman she once argued with over a misplaced beehive. They talk for hours. You spot them later, sharing flatbread under the eaves, heads close together. What changed? You ask. I realized, she says, that I don't want my story to end in standoff. She patches holes in her own shawl next. No point being remembered as the girl who ran from gods, but never fixed a tear in her sleeve. You help, of course. Mending's always easier with company. And between stitches, stories slip out again. I used to dream I still had hooves, she says. Did they clatter or glide? Both. Depends on the night. You pause. And now? Now I just dream about fennel soup that tastes like myrrh. You snort. So, nightmares? Worse. Mystery recipes? That afternoon, she brings out the scroll again, the long one. The one she's been adding to in slow increments for years now. The one you once feared she'd never finish, because finishing something that big always means letting it go. She unrolls it fully. The ink has aged. Some sections are faded, others freshly smudged from sleepless nights and tea spills. I think I'm going to stop here, she says. You read the final line. This is not the end of the story, but it is the part where I step off the page. You swallow. You sure? She nods. I've said what I needed to say. The rest, they'll make it theirs. You help her fold the scroll, not to hide it, but to let it rest. The next morning, she begins a new project. Not a book, not a garden, not a movement, a bench, just a bench. A long one, carved by hand, made from driftwood and old temple beams that she'd once hidden away behind the house. Why a bench? You ask, handing her a chisel. Because I want people to sit where something happened, not where something was worshipped. It takes 3 days. 4 if you count the extra time spent shooing off Melon, who insists on licking the varnish. When it's done, she places it under the fig tree facing east. Not toward the gods, not toward Olympus, but toward the rising sun. She doesn't carve her name into it, just a phrase, still here. And that's when you realize something. All these years, all this unraveling and retelling, all the weight and wonder of her myth, it's not disappearing, it's settling, not fading, not buried, just home. That evening, a traveler stops at the edge of the village. You offer her tea. She asks if this is the place where the woman lives, the one from the stories. You nod toward the bench. She comes and goes, you say, but she always leaves space. The traveler smiles, she sits, and you sit beside her. And the story, without needing to be told, continues anyway. Winter doesn't crash in, it whispers. It seeps into corners, curls under door frames, turns steam into poetry in the early mornings. The fig trees are bare now. The fields are quiet. The bees have gone deep into their hives, tucked into silence like monks of the wind. And Io, she's still here, wrapped in wool, hair streaked with threads of gray now, not from age alone, but from time fully lived. You find her most mornings at the bench, a thick scarf tucked around her face, a mug steaming in her hands. She watches the road, not like she's waiting for something, more like she's keeping it company. Funny, she says one day, not looking at you. How I spent so long running from roads, and now I just want to make sure they don't get lonely. You sit beside her. There's a kind of language in her quiet these days. You've learned it over years. The way she hums when she's thinking. The way she presses her thumb into her cup when she wants to say something hard. The way she keeps looking toward the trees after the leaves are gone. I think I might leave again, she says. You nod. Where to? She shrugs. Nowhere, somewhere, just not here for a while. You glance at the fig trees. You'll come back? Probably, but even if I don't, they will. She nods toward the village, and she's right. Because the story lives here now, in the girls who climb the fig trees without asking, in the boy who draws wingless cows in the dust, in the woman who left her husband after reading the scroll, then returned a year later with a goat and a grin. Io rises from the bench, walks to the garden, pulls a small bundle from the ground, roots, herbs, a stubborn carrot. Souvenirs, she says. Tools, you say? Same thing. You pack her a bag. Figs, of course. A carved spoon. A new scarf someone wove with her old temple pendant, stitched quietly into the hem. You don't say goodbye. You've learned better. Instead, you walk her to the edge of the fields. She turns to you, eyes soft. If they ask where I went, she says, tell them I went looking for somewhere to sit that hasn't heard my story yet. You smile. They'll listen. And if they don't, then you'll plant something. She nods. You watch her go. Slow steps, confident steps, not running, just going. And once again, the story folds itself into motion. You return to the village, to the bench, to the fig trees, to the life that no longer waits on thunder to feel meaningful. That evening, someone asks, "Will she come back?" You say, "She's in the frost, the figs, the silence. She never left." Later, you open a jar on your shelf. Inside is a scrap of parchment she left behind. It reads, "I walked through myth, through mistake, through miles. I carried the sky on my back. Then I learned the weight of my own name, and I left the rest behind." You place it gently back on the shelf. The fire crackles. The stars blink, slow and amused. And somewhere, a girl who was once a cow walks into another quiet village, with seeds in her pocket and no need to explain. Snow comes finally. Not the dramatic, swirling kind that buries rooftops and rewrites the land overnight, but a soft, steady drift. Enough to quiet the roads, to give the world that muffled hush that makes every sound feel like a secret. You stand by the window with your tea, watching it gather on the bench beneath the fig tree. The words carved into the wood, still here, fill with snowflakes, one by one, like even the sky wants to leave her a note. The village moves slower now. Children laugh into scarves. Melon the goat, older and rounder, wears a knitted sweater. No one knows who made it. Everyone suspects Io. You find yourself dreaming more these days. Not the chaotic dreams of gods and thunder and swarms. These dreams are quiet. A mug warming your palms. Her voice humming through the walls. The sound of hooves, distant, like memory galloping but never arriving. One morning, a young couple comes to your door. They don't knock. They just stand there, holding hands, shy but certain. "We were told this was where the story began," the woman says. You look at them. Mud-stained boots, eyes full of questions, hope stitched into their shoulders. You nod. "It didn't begin here," you say, "but it started again here. That counts." You make tea. They ask if they can see the scroll as if it's holy. You smile, pull it down from the shelf, and let them read. They turn pages slowly, like they're touching something that could fall apart. At one point, the man asks, "Did she ever regret speaking?" You don't answer right away. Then you say, "Not once. But sometimes she wished she'd said more while it still hurt." They sit in silence with that. When they leave behind a bundle. Fig jam, goat cheese, a small wooden carving of a bench. You place it beside your window. The mail slows, but it doesn't stop. A letter arrives from someone in the east. They've built a circular library. No shelves, just cushions and scrolls. In the middle is a stone bowl where readers can place something they're ready to let go of. On the door, it says, "You are still you, even after the worst thing." You smile. Later, a letter arrives from further away. It's barely legible, weather-stained, charred at the edges. You recognize the handwriting. "Found a beach with black sand. No one knows my name. I let them guess. They think I'm a wandering poet. I let them think it. There are goats here. One is terrible. I named her Melon, too. Miss you. Keep the bench warm. Still walking, you read it again, then again, and then you place it under a stone near the fig tree. A few days later, a girl you've never seen sits on the bench. She says nothing. She stays until sunset, watching the wind bend the bare branches, and then she leaves a fig on the seat. Not a message, just a memory. Winter deepens, the stars sharpen, the fire crackles louder in the evenings. You begin writing again, not to correct the myths, but to carry them forward, truthfully, imperfectly, humanly. You write, "There once was a girl who walked away, and because she walked, others stood, and because she stood, others spoke, and because they spoke, someone, somewhere, decided not to vanish." You close the scroll, add it to the shelf, you light a candle, and outside, under the moonlight, the bench waits, still here, always here, for whoever needs to sit next. The last thaw comes slowly. You wake to the sound of dripping, roof edges, fig branches, the slow, steady undoing of winter. Icicles shrink, footpaths reappear. The bench under the tree emerges again, its carved words visible beneath the soft melt. Still here. And you are. The village begins to stretch. Windows open again. Goats bleat louder. Someone starts sweeping the road, like it personally offended them by freezing in the first place. Everything breathes deeper. You sit on the bench. Just sit. Not remembering, not hoping, just sitting. And then you see her. Not in the distance, not on a road, not descending from the sky in a shimmer of divine irony. Just there, walking toward you from the direction of the orchard, as if she'd never left. Her hair is longer, her skin sun-darkened, her walk looser, more like a dancer than a traveler. There's a satchel across her back and a wooden spoon in her belt. She stops a few paces away, grins like the last time wasn't yesterday, but also wasn't so long ago. "You look older," she says. You grin back. "You look very opinionated." "I've seen some things," she replies, settling onto the bench beside you. You sit together for a while, watching a bird pick at leftover snow. "I found a mountain town that worships onions," she says. "No one knows why. They invited me to stay. I didn't." "Because of the onions?" "No, because it didn't feel like mine." You nod. "Did you find anywhere that did?" She tilts her head. "No, but I stopped needing to." There's a peace in her now, not the kind you get from victory, the kind you earn by outlasting the noise. "You came back," you say. She shrugs. "I always do." People notice, of course. They try not to rush her, not to swarm. They've learned, but there are glances, gifts left quietly. One child offers her a wooden carving of a fig tree with roots longer than the trunk. She accepts it with both hands. And then, one evening, after soup and stories and watching the stars wink into being, she asks you, "Do you think they'll keep telling it?" You don't ask what it is. You say, "Some version of it, yes." She smiles softly. "Then I think I'm ready for the last bit." You tilt your head. "The last bit?" She nods. "The part where I stop being the girl who lived through it and start being the woman who teaches others how to live after it." You lean back. "And how do you do that?" She shrugs. Same as always. You listen. You make soup. You leave the door open. You let people tell their own endings. She doesn't write anymore. She just listens. Some evenings, travelers still come. Not to be amazed, just to rest. They bring stories or questions or silence. She always makes room. Eventually, people stop saying, "I owe the myth." They say, "I owe the wise," or "I owe the quiet," or "I owe who tends the garden." She doesn't correct them. She just keeps planting. And one day, long after the last retelling has faded into folklore, after the final scroll has been thumbed through and tucked away, after every version has been debated and diluted and reimagined, there will still be a bench, a fig tree, a story that began with transformation but ended with something gentler, a life that was not written by gods, but by a girl who once walked and walked and walked, until she stood still, until she looked back and said, "I'm still here." Now the story has ended. The fire has burned low. The fig trees rustle in a wind that no longer carries fear or prophecy, just the sleepy hum of a world ready to rest. You don't need to hold anything from the story anymore. You can let the names drift away. Io, Hera, Zeus, Argus, even the gadfly. You can imagine their outlines softening, like sandcastles at high tide, until they are just shapes in the distance, familiar but no longer sharp. Now there is only breath and stillness. You are sitting somewhere quiet, wrapped in something warm. Your shoulders are no longer bracing against thunder. Your feet no longer running. You are still, just like Io became. And just like her, you've carried things. Maybe not divine grudges or mythic transformations, but fears, labels, moments that tried to define you before you were ready to speak for yourself. But like her, you're still here, still standing, still breathing, still becoming. Let your body relax into that. Let the weight of every untold story in you settle, not vanish, just soften, like snow on branches, like silence after a long, long song, because you've survived things too. You don't have to be a goddess to have been rewritten by the world, to have had your name twisted, your truth questioned, your voice muffled. But now, like Io, you get to choose what happens next. Not with declarations, not with thunder, but with small choices. What you plant, what you leave behind, what you choose to carry forward, and perhaps most sacred of all, when you decide to rest. So now, close your eyes. Feel your breath. Let it be slow. Let it be yours. You've listened. You've felt. You've witnessed. Now let it go. And as you drift into sleep, know this: there is a place in the story for those who walk away, a place for those who say no, a place for those who survive, who stay soft, who keep showing up anyway. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not done. You are still here. Good night.